Welcome to Indian time again. Today we have an issue on mascots, I guess. But first of all, I'd like to say that this is the month of January. We're down to the last couple of days of January, which is we call Stinchu, the shaking hand month. Or in later years, it's got its second name. We call it SKC, after the introduction of rifles and different things. People would shoot their rifles in the air at midnight to celebrate the new year. Our place names for today, we have two. First one is let me try that again. That's Rollins. Or I guess it's that's what they call Rollins. And the other one is Chinshash, which is a rocky point. It's in the a rocky point that's in the Summers area. So and Chinshash. The activities of the month, again, is during the month of January. We start out the month with jump dancing, people jump dancing. Today we're fortunate to have large buildings in Elmo and St. Ignatius where a lot of people gather to do jump dancing. In the past, we had to, people did it at homes, so there was jump dancing in different homes throughout the valley here a long time ago. And so people would go from one night here, sometimes they'd go the next night to another person's home. They would do that for several days. And then also after the jump dancing, then they would get into the medicine dances, which is a very serious time for a lot of the tribal members here, the medicine people, who this is a time of the year that they would get into their practices and heal people and all for the good and the benefit of the tribes. Storytelling was also done at this time of the year, sharing. As I mentioned before, the creation stories are our way of passing on to the young people the values and traditions of the Salish and Kootenai people. So it's very important that we continue to remember these traditional stories, and there's what we call creation stories. What also going on in this month here, as we all know, the 57th legislative session is going on, and we have several Indian bills that are of interest to Montana people, or Montana Indians. Right now, one of the main bills that we're working on for the tribes here is the House Bill 165, which is a repatriation bill. As we go on, that it's gotten out of committee and it's gotten out of the House. Now it's over in the Senate. But I understand there's some discussion going on this morning on the bill, and I don't know when it's going to go on to the Senate committee. But also, we remind you that the Elders Cultural Advisory Council meeting is always on the first Wednesday of the month, so the next meeting will be Wednesday the 7th, February 7th. And then the following week, on second Wednesday, February the 14th, we have our Cultural Awareness Workshop down at the Longhouse. And also we are all aware of the sad news that we've lost a great leader, a person who has contributed to our cultural program for many, many years, and not only to our program, but to the tribes and to his people as well, and that's John Peter Paul. And in the near future, I hope to do dedicate a program to John, so I'll be watching for that. I'll really in the process of putting something together to honor a gentleman who passed away at 92 and has really been an inspiration to me, and who has been a great supporter, and I always look to John for guidance to make sure a lot of the things that I do as the director of the Salish Culture Committee that is correct, and that is why we utilize and why we must respect our elders in such a way. Again, I guess we'll now go into today's topic, which we want to talk about, and that is mascots. You know, the mascots are not only on our reservation, but throughout the country. There's schools, professional teams who have utilized in many ways the words Indian, Chiefs, Redskin, Savage, those kinds of things that are more and more people are coming forward and being outspoken and talking about this issue. And today I have Velda Shelby, Dave Daniels, and Pat Pierre, who would like to share some things and some information, what's been happening with this issue and where they hope this issue will be going. So with that, I would like to introduce Velda Shelby and have her introduce the other guests.
Great. Thank you, Tony, and thank you for having us as guests today. It's a very difficult subject, and a lot of people have shied away from it simply because it generates a lot of controversy. And for some reason, people tend to get defensive because they feel as though we're picking on schools or we're picking on students, when in fact it's basically an issue of education. And so we've looked forward to an opportunity to speak to it publicly and to have a forum where we could raise awareness on the issue and maybe explain our perspective on why we consider it offensive or denigrating in any way to the Indian culture. About a year ago, we formed a task force, and we call it the Flathead Reservation Task Force on Indian Mascot and Logo. And this task force is to merely educate people in the community to the opposition to the name the local schools use for their mascots, and typically the public schools on the reservation, Hot Springs Savages, Ronan Chiefs and Maidens, Arlee Warriors and Scarlets. So we just wanted to be able to discuss our position here and tell people why it is offensive and why we oppose these names and what we'd like to do about it. And ideally, maybe people who can influence the boards of authority who can address these issues can begin to open some dialogue and help us make people understand that this is a serious issue. So with my task force is Dave Daniels. He's out of Ronan. He also is with the Montana Human Rights?
Flathead Reservation Human Rights Coalition.
Flathead Reservation Human Rights Coalition, and he's come to the table with us to help us go into schools or wherever we need to go to do some outreach on this issue. We've also invited Pat Pierre, a respected elder from the Hot Springs area, because he has a really good understanding of the issue, and he was directly involved when Hot Springs adopted their name, so we wanted him to speak to that issue. I guess what we need to explain is that it's not something we sit back and decide that it needs to be a topic. A lot of people say we're trying to be politically correct, when in fact that isn't the case at all. It's an education issue, and we believe that it's kind of an obscure form of racism simply because it's institutionalized. If you take a student and you bring them into your system and you ask them to conform, you expect them to conform, they're going to comply, and they're going to accept the image that you've created. And in this case, they've created an image of Indian people that trivializes our culture, that is demeaning to us in many ways. And a lot of people say, well, we don't think it's a harmful stereotype because we're honoring you. That's been our explanation throughout the school districts on this reservation, is people feel hurt, they feel saddened, they get defensive, and they say we're trying to take away something that they've created to honor us, when in fact we don't consider it honor. And there's organizations throughout the United States that agree with that. There's a lot of educational institutions nationally, the National Congress of American Indians, there's the churches, human rights coalitions. A lot of people have come to understand that when Indians feel that it is offensive, then it simply is, and it's a form of discrimination, and nobody's benefiting from this. So our task force is here today to talk about what we'd like to do to at least heighten awareness to this issue and to sensitize people in the communities that maybe it is a harmful stereotype and it's time to end that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Velda. And it is a very touchy subject, I guess. It's very, to me, it's something that I think if you want to honor something, then you respect that. And so to honor is to respect. And we look at this issue and I think when you say savage, when you say chief, when you say maiden, when you say these things, redskin, what is it that you're really saying? What is it that you're really thinking about when you say that? And to me, it's you know, it's very disheartening to me when you're watching a professional football game with thousands and thousands of people at the game, plus a lot more of those watching those on television, to have someone from another culture running up and down the sideline trying to represent Native American people, Indian people. And that to me is not honoring. And I think in order to bring communities back together, we need to get back to the basics of understanding each other, of respecting each other. And those are the issues that we would like to bring out here. It's not an issue that we would like to use to separate people, but something that would bring us back together the way it was meant to be. And I think if we really look hard at this issue, it's not that hard to change. It's not really an issue of wanting to just the stroke of a pen or a pencil to erase and to do away with something that could bring a lot of people back together. So I think we really need to take a serious look at this, to open your hearts up, to look beyond what you think the meaning is, the meaning of warrior, the meaning of chief, the meaning of savage. You know, so some of these words are a little more. Do people actually understand and know what the actual meaning of savage is? Or redskin? Or the other names that's been given to the Indian people and tribes throughout the country. And I think that we really need to take a hard look at that. And I would like to go to our next guest, but before we do that, I would like to take a short break here.
Sometimes life can seem a bit overwhelming, especially when things are changing so fast. I've found that it really helps to stay connected during those times. That's why I reach out to family, friends, and people I look up to when I need some good advice or just someone to talk to. It's amazing how sharing can really raise your spirits. Take time to connect with someone in your life, and if you don't have someone, Big Brothers Big Sisters can help. Hello? I was just gonna call.
Welcome back, and thank you. We're here talking about the issue of mascots in schools and professional teams that carry mascots of different names that claiming to honor Indian people, but Indian people throughout the country have voiced their concern and their opinion that it does not really actually honor. Again, as I mentioned before, to honor someone is to respect someone. So looking at different ways to honor people through respect, and one of those would be to take a hard look at our area schools who have taken the names of different of Indians in different forms. The next guest that I would like to introduce is Pat Pierre, who is an elder of the Salish people, Pend Oreille people, and he's also part of the Cultural Advisory Council that we have down for the Longhouse. And Pat has been through a lot in his 70-plus years, and he is a respected person, and I look to him for a lot of information and guidance in my role as a director for the Salish Culture Committee. But also Pat was born and raised and continues to be very traditional in values of Salish people. And Pat was in school at the time in Hot Springs when the name of the Hot Springs Savages became permanent. And I would like to have Pat explain on his experience and to talk about his time in school in Hot Springs. So with that, I'd like to welcome Pat Pierre.
Lemnem Chatouan, Heskelkat Pesia, Skeli, Kesok Yukit, Smaknik, and to the rest, a good day. I'd like to go back some 60-some years to my school years in Hot Springs. I started school in my life in 1935. Started my first grade at Camas Prairie, part of the second grade, then I went to Hot Springs. And back in about 38 years, I was still in elementary school. And that's when the name Savages come into the school. I never did fully understand why they chose that particular name. But it was highly opposed by Indian students, which were the percentage of Indian students was, I think, 50% at least at that time. And it was, we had an athletic department, and they were the ones that kind of chose us, the school board and the athletic department. And so the Hot Springs teams become the Savages. And all the Indian students opposed that. And even some of the white students, the non-Indian, that were on the teams already, high school. A lot of them just said plainly that they didn't want to be called Savages because they were non-Indian and they were, I guess, pretty sensitive about the name. We were, all the Indian students were, even in the elementary grades. Then when I got into high school and got into the basketball and football teams, I was a Savage. But all through those years, every place we went to participate in sports, we were sometimes ridiculed, sometimes a lot of harassment because we were savages. And we suffered a lot of trauma in them days because of that. So we decided that, well, if we're going to be savages, we'll play the part. And we started, our basketball team was almost all Indian students, a football team. So in order for us to go through that time, we just started to say, well, if that's what they're going to call us, if that's what we are, then we'll play the part. Needless to say, during those games, that the Savages were very successful in winning games. Because of our aggressiveness, we said, okay, if that's what we're going to be called, then that's what we're going to play. I think we lost a lot of self-respect in those times because of that, because of that logo. So, and a lot of the students, when they got up to 7th and 8th grade, they talk about, well, I don't want to play football, I don't want to play basketball, because I don't want to be a savage, I don't want to be called a savage. And it is understandable. Well, in those times, I didn't really, look into these things as something real serious. But as times went on, I began to see the seriousness of that logo. Simply because we were not savages, and because that the team was made up mostly of Indian students, and that name Savage kind of give an image of, well, these are all Indian students, so the name fits them. It didn't. A lot of people that come in to the high school age and begin to participate in sports, a lot of them dropped out because of that logo, because they had become savages. A lot of non-Indian students didn't play because of that. And we voiced our opposition. We voiced it in the school system, we voiced it in town, we voiced it everywhere we went. And so to call a school by a name such as Savages, or any of the other names pertaining to Indian people, although they think they're honoring the people, they're not the Indian people. They are not honoring it, especially in this time, in this day and age, where there's so much prejudice. There's so much of that out there in all the schools that whenever you come up with a name like that and you go out off the reservation, immediately you're a part of an Indian tribe, you're part of a reservation, and so that name becomes something that shouldn't be used. We used to travel all over. Back in those times, the divisions, A, B, C teams weren't in existence so much. Seemed like everybody played everybody, and so we traveled a long ways to go to games. And as soon as we walked and run out on the floor, there was a lot of things happened that shouldn't have happened, a lot of hissing, a lot of different things that were said out there by the audience, not by the students in there, but by audiences. Sometimes they'd hiss at us because we were savages. And so it was hard. It was hard. I kind of fought my way through school because of that. I wanted to finish school. But I fought that logo all the way through. It hung with me. It stayed with me. I couldn't. I couldn't get rid of it. We couldn't change the name. We tried. There was a lot of people, a lot of the students that I remember that used to really stand up and say we don't want it. It was the Ogden brothers, Jack and Pete Ogden. There was the Blodgett brothers. There was a lot of families that were in the school system that were totally opposed to it. And so I never did get used to that name. I never did get to a place where I said, well, that's okay, you know, it's all right. I'm not in that school no more. And after I got out of that school and started working for a living, I always look back at that as a bad part of my life because I had to live through that part of being called something that I wasn't. And I think that this goes through a lot of the schools. I think it's an ongoing thing, and then I think it's got to stop. I get calls like you do, Velda gets calls. I get calls at my home from people in Hot Springs that are asking my opinion. What do you think of it? And some of those are students there when I was in school. You know, I still remember some of those people, and they call me. Said, well, what do you think about this? You know, I just tell them the story that I just told now, that's the way I felt, and that's the way a lot of my fellow Indian students felt, that it was wrong.
Okay, Pat, we're out of time right now, so we'll be back. We'll follow this with another program, and thank you for joining us.